Yeah, you go.
Hey everybody, this is Ian O'Byrne. I'm the department editor of multi-literacies for the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy. We've been putting together a series of columns looking at literacy practices in online spaces. The latest column was all about the web literacy map, and we've been conducting interviews to go along with the column to unpack some of the complexity that exists. One of the authors of the column is on with me right now. Greg, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Greg McVerry. I'm an assistant professor at Southern Connecticut State University. I've worked with Ian for a long time now. We were in the same cohort at the New Literacies Research Lab, and he got me involved pretty much with Doug and the web literacy community as we really shaped the version 1.1 of the map, and then I really got involved as we revised to version 1.5 and saw that through to the launch, and now been working as a volunteer contributor in the different Mozilla communities, working as we try to take the map and have it launch for Mozilla web clubs or develop materials with Laura Hilliger on Teach Like Mozilla around open web leadership and what it takes to, to get involved in open source projects like the Web Literacy Map.
Very cool. So why take all this time? Like, why is this important? Like you said, you and I, we were at the New Lit Lab together. We study a lot of these different literacies. Why invest this much time?
Mainly because this is how I think we read, write, and participate as a social practice of literacy. But at the same time, we need to shape the web. I think we're kind of at a juncture. We've looked at the web as a way to kind of understand it, but now we're working with kids to take control of their own sense of agency and their own sense of identity to help kind of build a better web and not just understand the web.
So is this really that different? You know the field, all the different players in the field, in these different talks we talk about new literacies, digital literacy. Where does this lie within all of those, and what affordances do we have of viewing literacy in this way?
I use a strange metaphor for this question. It's the DNA of chimpanzees. Basically, humans and chimpanzees share 98% of our DNA, but the amount of complexity captured in that 2%, that's the ability that we can simulate the future and make decisions. And retell the past and create Beethoven. That's captured in 2%. And I see the web as very much similar in that framework. That yes, I think a lot of the traditional skills, what we're doing is adding additional layers of complexities and also new ways to make meaning that didn't exist before. And the other big change is just the scope and speed at which they spread. You look at the printing press or type and how long it took that to get across the globe. We're looking at 800 years and still a lot of the world didn't have access to books. Now we have the web's a couple decades old and billions are online, and with the next 5 years the next billion are going to come online. No tool for literacy has spread with that viral. I hate to use the word viral, but that's basically what it is. Just influenced every bit of our lives until we become a network society. And if we want the next billion to be able to access the web as a way to shape their lives and not just to have their lives shaped for them, we need to teach those folks and our students everywhere around the globe to be web literate.
Yeah, well said. I was looking at recent Google reports, and they said, the next billion people that join the internet will be non-native English speakers. In terms of looking at the other, you talked about the 2% that's different. What do we gain with the 2%, or what are we trying to build into that 2% that makes it different from what's already out there, the way that we frame technology or literacy and technology use?
Well, when I look at the map and I look at what's different is I could teach you to, and this is an argument we've been making for years, I can teach you basic literacy and what we call foundational literacy skills online as you're shaping web resources. What I can't do well, I mean, we do teach in no-fi and lo-fi situations very intentionally, but it's hard to teach you to shape web resources with just pen and pencil. And so what we gain is not just the return of the image over non-verbocentric or non-verbocentric ways to make meaning. The word had a good 800-year run, but that does shift the way that we make. But we've lowered barriers of access to these tools while also kind of, I think, maybe creating new barriers. Yes, that next billion are coming online in non-English speaking nations, yet English is dominating the web, or most of the, Mark Sermon just did a good talk, you can find it on Quartz, where yes, that's where the next billion are around the world, but a majority of the apps and influence and the money is flowing back to traditional power sources. So I think it's not just how much what we gain, but creating opportunities for allow others to gain what we have over the last 30 years. So it's I think we have to be forward thinking and very intentional in designing the web for the next billion.
So I mean, we are pushing, and I see the value in the web literacy initiative. I see a lot of areas where it reaches out and tries to consolidate some of the thinking. I like the fact that it's a collaborative effort. I agree with your point that I love the metaphor of having the extra 2% that makes it, it's the same but different. But that being said, what's missing from it still? Like, I mean, we've written about it, we've worked on it. What are we still missing there? Where's the next step here?
Yeah, looking at it, and I want to mention before I get into what's missing, and this is something that I got out of Rise 015, was I don't look at these as objectives, and I'm not going to get into the prescriptive and proscriptive that Doug talked about. But for me, these aren't really objectives. They were subjective in the sense that, especially moving from version 1.1 to 1.5, we were very deliberate in trying to bring in values of identity and agency and control. Like, for example, splitting design and accessibility, or focusing in on the idea of open practices. And we actually included a skill just for advocating for an open web. So I think what we created weren't really a set of objectives, but a set of subjectives to look at it. What I think is missing, and this is where we're kind of create a tight net around web literacy, and we talk a lot about digital skills, like where does video production fit in? Where does that the design work that really gets at the aesthetic? And I'm so glad that we split design out and got through the aesthetic in there, but it's still kind of at the programming and coding level. What I want to get, like, where's the art in it? And does it even belong? But that is so much of the skills. When I think about my students, like, this is the kids that we're teaching now are really the first YouTube generation who have had YouTube through middle school on, 2006 on, around when they're in middle school. My dates could be off a little bit on when they're in middle school, but they teach me things like, oh, that's a jump cut. Talking about that quick kind of camera shift, or there's like a lingo around video production meant for that YouTube style. And is that a web literacy skill, or is that just a digital skill? So I'm stuck on, when we're looking at the building and writing for the web, where the design aesthetic comes in, or the new ways of communicating in different modes and mediums. When I look at DeviantArt, and I look at some of the digital art productions that go on, does that fit as a web literacy skill? I think we were smart in kind of trying to just get at, this is how you share and make spaces for spreadable media, not so much making the spreadable media itself. So when I look at the map, I see it more as this is what you need to get your cool makes out, not so much how you design those makes. And that kind of design thinking, though, maybe that needs to be in there to a greater degree.
Well, that's the challenge, because I mean, we going back to our years teaching writing, and teaching kids how to write, you would see the students that needed they needed the ability to just write, and then you start to talk about style or voice, and their tone in their writing, and you start to see their skill as a writer, and you always try to level them up. I think we need to be able to build that in. So thinking about those tiny types, thinking about our elementary, middle school, high schoolers, our adults that are looking at this and they say, I want to be web literate. What's the first step?
Letting them play. The first step is really letting them kind of shape their identities and telling meanings. And I think this is, I've seen people doing this with their children before they're even, literate. And people laugh at me when I have my 4-year-old sending me emoticons. But they, like they're threatened, like, how dare you, almost. But to me, it's like, that's how we read, write, and participate. Why would you, if I gave my 4-year-old a pencil and he wrote me like he can only write a couple letters, but I would probably be praised. Yet at the same sense, there's, this idea that it's bad parenting to connect the students early. And I disagree. I want my students to be able to think about this stuff from an early age. And when I look at elementary age students, say your kindergartners and first graders, when I look at how could that web map be moved down, there's a lot of space for them to use, like under reading. I think one of them is using hyperlinks to access a range of resources. You should be doing that with elementary age students. They can be creating digital stories. I do it with my students all the time. I have them creating digital short stories that focus on phonics. Like, for example, they take a word family, or take something like the R, an R controlled vowel, and take a bunch of and tell a story. So I'm embedding traditional skills while also having them build for the web. And that's, I think, stuff that every elementary school teacher can do. They need to take what they do well and kind of fork it for the web, and take what we know works about teaching skills and start increasing those for the web.
So one last question for you, and I know I broke my rule, but it's so when do you start?
I think your only rule is to say, I broke my rule at.
That's it. I always start with 4 and then I break it.
Yeah.
It keeps me focused. So, I mean, you sort of already answered this, but I want to hear you out and out say it, because I think there's this question that exists for a lot of people. I'm an educator. When do I start? Or I'm a parent. When do I start? When do I start building in these web literacies for my son, daughter, my student? When do we start this stuff?
And see, this is where now I'm not talking web literacy, but just, digital skills or tools in general, which are different than the very, the skills we laid out in the web literacy map. But there's, I think, this idea that everyone does need to be web literate, but there's a passion and an agency and an interest involved. And I don't think we need to assume that every kid's going to have this passion. There's plenty of kindergartners and first grades who might just be passionate about going outside. They might be passionate about making. They might be, and so I don't think we have to push this idea that every kid needs to code. I think what every kid needs to do is to really have an agency and kind of get at the iterative thinking or the problem solving that is inherent in web literacy. And those skills could translate to, whatever their passion is. But there is no magic number. I don't hide the internet, the web, for my kids. I let them play on the web. My kids, use tablets, they use phones. And I think in the elementary schools, they are they're getting by third grade, every kid's taking a test on a computer, and that's on the web. So if schools are worried about their test scores, guess what? You need to worry about the students' web literacy skills, because navigation is central. Being able to navigate those multiple windows on Park and SBAC, I mean, you have to teach those skills by third grade. I wish we knew, what kind of variance just in Park and SBAC is caused by the screen navigations, but I'm assuming it's a lot. So at least by third grade. But I think when you look at the iPad studies, the greatest significance in those are usually often in the kindergarten levels, but that's because those reading skills are, you're going from reading nothing to being able to decode words, which is amazing. So it's an easy thing to bump. But it's easy to bump with the tools because you can build in the things we know that improve comprehension, like oral language reading and just talking and analyzing texts. So that's why you don't really, those are the, once you hit middle school, when comprehension's harder to measure, or shouldn't be measured at all, in my opinion, often, it gets tough. So I think, so long and short answer is start early, but allow kids' passions to drive how deep they get into web literacy. And I think that's, going back to my original point is, where do all those, I think one of our skills in building under composing was something like embedding or creating web resources in ways appropriate to the media and genre. And just think about how many skills that like one line contains. So any of these can be broken up, can be used into multiple pathways. So I wouldn't want to just give like this is the composing badge, or, check off, they did that skill under composing. Use that as part of your curriculum, like design your own pathways and look for ways that you can hook in the web literacy map to bring them into the classroom. And I think that's really the first step, is to just look at, it's a map, and that metaphor is very deliberate. We're basically letting you choose the pathways. You just can use the web literacy map as a guide.
Well said. Yeah, I mean, for those of us that have questions about what bearing this has on the classroom, like Greg said, go on and look up the Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium tests, the practice tests, look up the PARC tests, and see how many web literacies are built into those. It's something our students need in third grade, at least here in the U.S. So once again, this is an interview that goes along with the column that we put out in the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy. These interviews are meant to give some more explanation and some depth to the column that we put out. By all means, please, you can find the column online. I'll have all these blog posts, have the videos and the column itself. You can reach out, connect with any of us. Greg, where are you on the internet? How can people get in touch with you?
Pretty much, I forgot to put my lower third on, but pretty much on Twitter is the easiest way to find me, at jgmac1106. I blog also at jgregorymcverry.com, and one of the side effects of knowing Doug is now I'm blogging in like 10 different places, and links to all those different spaces where I write can be found on my blog. And if you're interested in looking at kind of the history of my thinking of version 1.5, if you look at the category of Teach the Web on my blog, you'll see my reflections over the last year of how we did this. Most of those, now that I look back at them, they just sound like, it's just like, why did I write that? But it's good to capture all of those materials. So yeah, jgmac1106 on the Twitters, and that's where you'll find me.
Awesome.
All right, thanks, Ian.
What's that?
I said thank you.
Not a problem. Yeah, reach out to any of us. Get in touch. We'd be more than willing to come on out and talk with you about the Web Lit Map. Come out and see what it can look like for you and for your students. And reach out and connect with us. And
start a Mozilla Web Club, or reach out and join the curriculum calls. We're always now that we've got the map, we're shaping learning resources. So please reach out use the hashtag Teach the Web on Twitter. Always looking for more volunteer contributors. There's a place for everyone within the Mozilla Learning Network. So jump on board.
Well said. All right, with that, we'll close it out.